We all know Luna Park Sydney, and we all know Luna Park Melbourne. But what about Luna Park Perth, Brisbane, and Adelaide? What am I talking about? Well, actually, all three of those parks did exist. That's right, Australia has been home to more than just the two lunar parks we're familiar with today. 3 other Aussie capital cities have all been home to a lunar park in the past, and today we're going to unravel the mystery of where they came from, what they looked like, and why they no longer exist today. Buckle up folks, it's time to explore Australia's lunar parks. The tale of Perth's lunar park is a heartbreaking story of corruption, con artistry, and a very valuable Ferris wheel, and it all started with a man named Lionel Morris. Morris was an Englishman who emigrated to Melbourne in the early 20th century and saw the early days of Luna Park Melbourne, which had opened in St Kilda in 1912. Morris was captivated by the park, and when he relocated to Perth, he opened his own version at Cottesloe in 1928. Luna Park Cottesloe was the result of the banding together of several existing amusement booth operators and showmen, some of whom were looking for new work after Perth's White City was forced to close around the same time. I discussed White City in yesterday's video if you'd like to learn more about the controversial history around that park. However, the Cottesloe Park would also suffer from Ugly Land's legacy. The park's entanglement in a racist policy to drive Aboriginal people out of the inner city, as well as sentiment against amusement parks as havens for crime and degeneracy among Perth's upper class, meant that Morris was always likely to make powerful enemies by starting an amusement park. The original Cottesloe Park featured various attractions, the largest of which was the Palais des Danses, a large open-air platform on the beach that would host circus acts, vaudeville cabarets, and jazz bands every night. But influential Perth locals strongly opposed the park and Morris himself, and it would be a few years before Morris was forced to relocate his park. Luckily, there was a booming beach suburb ripe with opportunity just a short hop away, which was gaining something of a reputation thanks to the opening of its new hotel and new developments around the beachfront. And Luna Park Scarborough was born. Opening in the summer of 1939, the more long-lived of Perth's 2 Luna Park iterations was directly across from the sand of Scarborough Beach, and even featured Perth's own version of the Big Mouth facade, although this one was blue with crossed eyes and just 3 teeth, which is somehow even more horrifying than the already creepy Sydney and Melbourne faces. The new park would feature a Ferris wheel, dodgem cars, a flying boats ride, a ride called Gee Whiz, a carousel, and a large sideshow alley with laughing clowns and shooting and archery galleries. This Luna Park would entertain families for some 33 years. During its opening years, it was only open during the summer months, but its popularity quickly grew and it was able to stay open year-round after 1943, closing down at night due to wartime blackout regulations. Sometime in the 1950s, the face was damaged by a cyclone, later being dismantled for public safety reasons. And that was only the beginning of the downfall for Perth's Luna Park. According to famous Australian author Roy Malloy, who wrote a book about the Scarborough Luna Park entitled The Dark Side of the Moon in 2018, the new park became entangled in a dark criminal underbelly. Or rather, it had been from the very beginning. The man who started it all, Lionel Morris, had actually served a prison sentence during his time in Melbourne for some form of con artistry, and it appears his Perth creation may have continued in his footsteps. Gambling, prize fights, and paying grafts to security guards are among the allegations of a secret, seedy underbelly to the park in its latter days. That may have contributed to the park's closure in the 1970s, although there are also stories of a greedy landowner who manipulated his way into the position of ownership of the park only to sell it off for the land value and for its Ferris wheel, which was supposedly a very valuable model. While it's hard to distinguish urban legend from the truth, whatever the case, Luna Park Scarborough closed in 1972, with the land being turned into a shopping centre fittingly named the Luna Maximart Shopping Centre. Unfortunately, the park is all but forgotten in the minds of many Perth locals, and the allegations of seedy underground behaviour mean it lives on more as an urban legend than a fond memory. From 2 Luna Parks mired in criminal conspiracy, underground gambling and racial segregation, we moved to the east coast to Brisbane, where there were 2 Luna Parks that were entangled in political corruption, the church, and even more criminal conspiracy. Brisbane's first Luna Park, and by far the most famous, was a very ambitious project planned for the hilltop suburb of Bowen Hills in 1940. Planned and designed by T.H. Eslick, the same man who opened Luna Park Melbourne and Sydney's White City, this was to be his crowning glory, set on 5 acres of estate land. The centerpiece of it all was a grand ballroom named Cloudland, touted as the best ballroom in the Southern Hemisphere, with majestic entrances that could be seen for miles around, a huge wooden dance floor, and even a funicular railway to transport guests up the steep hillside. Eslick attracted investors from the south with the promise that the ballroom would be the centerpiece of an even larger and grander replica of Melbourne's Luna Park, featuring Australia's first electric race course, a Big Dipper roller coaster, and a scenic railway. But right away, things started to go wrong. Construction was slowed by the impending Second World War, but even the tiny progress being made was marred with interruptions and tragedy. A fire broke out in the half-completed ballroom, Union infighting caused labour disruptions, a guard of the site was assaulted with shots fired, and strong winds blew over a part of the scenic railway. There was a brief glimmer of hope when the ballroom opened, albeit 13 months behind schedule, with a razzle-dazzle affair, but as crowds failed to show up and war efforts continued to detract from construction and profits, Eslick could not deliver his promised park. The roller coasters and rides were never constructed, investors lost their money, and less than 6 months after the opening, the Cloudland Ballroom closed in January 1941. Eslick put the ballroom up for auction, resigned as its director, and was never heard from again. After the war ended, the ballroom was purchased by two sisters, Maya Winters and Frances Roach, who put aside the idea of reviving the entire amusement park and instead renamed the entire project to Cloudland, operating the funicular railway and the ballroom. For the next 35 years, the Cloudland Ballroom would host ballroom dancing championships, debutante balls, state receptions, and more, quickly becoming Brisbane's premier entertainment centre and an iconic part of the city's skyline. This was a place where couples met and fell in love for the first time, shared their first dances and first kisses. The venue would host Princess Alexandra, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Buddy Holly, Cold Chisel, Midnight Oil and The Cure were among the artists to grace its stage. In 1967, the funicular railway was retired from operation, but the ballroom continued to be as popular as ever. It became a cultural icon of Brisbane, home not only to the city's music and entertainment industry, but the event space of choice for all the city's top charity and social events. And then, one of the most enraging, saddening chapters in the history of Australia's entertainment industry would unfold in the early 1980s. Enter the National Party government, under the leadership of Joh Bjelke-Petersen. Known for his unrelenting conservatism and institutional corruption, Bjelke-Petersen remains Queensland's longest-serving premier. Known as the hillbilly dictator, he led a government plagued with corruption, growth of police power, and restriction of civil liberties. And what happened to Cloudland is just one example. Between 1979 and 1982, Cloudland had begun to fall into disrepair, and there were strong calls for action to be taken for its preservation. No one could have predicted what would happen next. On the evening of November 7, 1982, security guard on duty Greg Wilson recalls being approached out of the blue and told, "The building is about to come down, run in and salvage anything you want." Wilson saved the clock from above the dance floor. Within an hour of that interaction, Cloudland had been completely demolished. The morning afterwards, the streets were flooded with angry onlookers and protesters in utter disbelief that such a cultural icon had been unceremoniously pulled to the ground. The demolition was done by the Dean brothers, a demolition company that became associated with doing the government's dirty work when it came to controversial demolition projects. The demolition took place despite there being no permits and despite the fact that the building was listed on the National Trust, all to make way for an apartment complex. Meanwhile, to Brisbane's north, there was another Luna Park, lesser known but just as mired in controversy. Opening in 1944, Luna Park Redcliffe was actually owned and operated by the Redcliffe Town Council, who appointed 2 amusement managers to operate the park for them. It was a small park, but had a steam train, a Ferris wheel, sideshows and car rides, as well as a saltwater swimming pool. While its history is not as in-depth and there is less information about it than Brisbane's more famous Luna Park project, Luna Park Redcliffe did become the centre of a huge council scuffle in the 1950s, which would lead to years of litigation and court cases. While the Redcliffe Council had owned the park to begin with, they eventually sold it to local businessman Hal Buchanan. Buchanan would go on to sell the park to the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Brisbane after another showman attempted to open amusement rides on Scarborough Beach to the north of Redcliffe. Hey, Scarborough. Buchanan tried to take the local council to court, saying he believed he should have exclusive rights to amusement operations in Redcliffe. This led to countless court battles, and once the Archdiocese got involved and tried to influence matters in their favour, it resulted in council members walking out of meetings and resigning on the spot. In the end, the park was sold again by the Archdiocese in 1952 and let out a peaceful end to its existence, and is believed to have been closed in 1966. The last and definitely the most famous of the defunct Luna Parks in Australia is the legendary Luna Park Glenelg, the predecessor to today's Sydney Park. This park stood at the famous Glenelg Beach in Adelaide, a very popular tourist suburb which has since been home to the now defunct Magic Mountain and today's iteration, the Beach House. The story of this Luna Park began in 1928 when a man named F.S. Gordon presented a proposal to build a scenic railway roller coaster on Glenelg Beach. Gordon's proposal was to build a small amusement park called Glenelg Town, similar in design to the White City amusement parks, featuring a scenic railway, a water chute, and some other small attractions. In the end, Gordon was not given permission to go ahead with construction, but land at Collie Reserve was set aside in the hopes that a similar project may be constructed in the future. Glenelg wouldn't have to wait long. In 1929, a lease was granted to a man named David Atkins to build a roller coaster, the Big Dipper. This lease was then expanded about 6 months later to allow for the construction of several other attractions, including a Ferris wheel, river caves, and attractions called Noah's Ark and Goofy House. Atkins and his business partner Herman Phillips would construct their park based on Luna Park, Melbourne. The park opened in October 1930. The unique business model of Atkins and Phillips saw the park free and open to the public, with admission being charged on a per-attraction basis. However, the amusement park would not be an easy venture for the operators. Residents of Glenelg felt that the amusement park was attracting undesirable characters, and it quickly became unpopular with locals. Sensing this shift in public opinion, the local council also made life more difficult for Atkins and Phillips, and there was a very tense relationship between the park and the council. Atkins approached the council on several occasions to negotiate rent prices and to request to open some of the rides on Sundays, but both requests were unanimously rejected. Fearing that any further deterioration in relations with the council may result in the death of his park, Atkins began investigating alternate locations, and in 1934 they found it, a site adjacent to the newly constructed Sydney Harbour Bridge at Milson's Point. In late 1934, Atkins placed the park into voluntary liquidation under the claim that it was not profitable. All of the park's assets went up for auction, and they were purchased by Atkins and Phillips themselves, who dismantled them and shipped them to Sydney. These attractions would form the basis of the first iteration of Luna Park Sydney, which opened a year later in 1935. Unfortunately, none of the original attractions survive today, although several are recreated fairly faithfully, most notably in the Coney Island Funhouse. The vast majority of the original rides were scrapped after Luna Park Sydney closed its doors for the first time in 1979, in the aftermath of the tragic ghost train fire, which was responsible for the deaths of 7 people. As mentioned before, amusement centres have continued to operate in Glenelg since, and the Beach House remains in operation to this day, on the land previously occupied by Luna Park Glenelg. And so, that brings our journey through Australia's defunct Luna Parks to a conclusion. Please let me know which one you found the most interesting in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.